there's not a single place where I've been that has challenged me as much as South Africa has in so many ways. And for me, that was my big shock, is that it's a country that make you face with realities and makes you learn how to use real words to express complex issues.
I find that that is true if you're willing to do that. What's also scary about South Africa is that it's very easy to hide from it, where there are all of these circles of places where it doesn't feel like you are connected to what's going outside. There are all of these little bubbles where if you just jump from bubble to bubble to bubble, you actually don't have to face a lot of the stuff that's going on if you don't want to.
I think South Africa is not a place that you can ever say, oh, I understand this country. And I loved it because I felt so challenged at the same time.
Welcome to Season 2 of Are We Our Work, an ongoing independent research project mapping and exploring our ever-shifting landscapes, identities, and relationships to work. Season 2 is centered around questions of love, relationships, and work.
We are your co-hosts. I am Nadia Patel. I'm an artist, I'm a designer, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host,
Kim Busielo. I work in public relations and think about personal relations. The theme for Season 2 is Labors of Love.
So how does this run?
All right, researcher Tiffany Ibrahim, she will be in conversation with a range of practitioners across Gauteng about their relationships to love, to each other, and to work. Tiffany conducted these interviews throughout 2022, and we, your co-hosts, will then navigate the reflections and behind-the-scenes conversations on some of the key ideas that emerge in each episode. So, Nadira, what is in store for us this week?
We've got something quite special. Today's episode is called Home Away from Home.
Mm-hmm.
In today's episode, Tiffany interviews Muriel, Huet, and Shalane Yuen on love, home, and homemaking in another place. Specifically making home in a city that many of us feel we're in a constantly complicated relationship with.
So I'm assuming both Muriel and Shalane are not from South Africa and have made a home here in some way or another.
So Muriel and Shalane take us on a journey through an emotional journey through ideas of comfort and discomfort, finding home through love, becoming mothers here in Johannesburg in particular, making a new life in a new place and choosing a new place as your home.
Right. So who are our guests?
Yes.
What do they do? Where are they from?
Muriel is a consultant in education, and Shalane is the executive director of the Trevor Noah Foundation. Yeah, I'm really excited for this conversation. It was recorded in studio in Johannesburg. Are you keen to listen?
Very. Let's dive in.
What does it mean to build a home away from home? And I'm really trying to think about the concept of home. Maybe you understand yourself to have many homes, but what does it mean to build a home in Johannesburg away from wherever your former home was?
The first thing that comes in my mind when you ask that is friendships. I mean, I left one, a bit before 20, and you find your family and friends. Some of my strongest friendships are since I've moved abroad, and especially in South Africa, because we are so far away geographically and also emotionally. It's not easy to explain your life to people back in your home country. So you're recreating a complete new home with no past. And I found this extremely liberating because I feel like I arrived in Joburg when I was 33. It was 5 years ago, yeah. It's quite special to be able to build your own family at a certain age in a new country. And it's necessary because we're so far away.
So when I go home, I don't really talk about my life unless I'm asked, and I'll give very specific information.
That's so true.
But
me too, yeah.
Yeah, but it's just very frustrating because I know that they won't understand. And so even if I'm responding, they're half listening anyway. And it just feels like a life that is so different to what they understand or care about that it's just not worth it. I do feel like that is a little bit of a trade-off, is when you live this lifestyle, there is a piece of it that your first home will never understand. But in terms of home, I completely agree with you. I think it is those friendships, but it's those friendships that it's those deep friendships to where you feel comfortable enough to say your deepest fears around, right?
Yeah.
It's like the ones that you can call if you feel like everything is going wrong, and they'll understand, they'll listen to you, they'll understand, they'll be able to give you advice.
I think, friendship is key.
Yeah.
Can we shift over to romantic love and what it's like to fall in love in Joburg?
Who starts?
I'll go first.
Okay.
So I mentioned that I met my husband and my partner now.
And how long have you been with your partner now?
So I met him at the end of that first year.
Okay, so that's long time.
It is a long time. It's almost 8 years, yeah.
wow.
Maybe 8.5.
Wow.
Yeah. And I met him at one of his shows, and then we connected on Facebook. He'll say I connected first. I'll say that I might have, but I don't remember. And then we went out for lunch, and then we went out like immediately the next day. At that point, I already knew that there was something different about him. I felt like he was very open and welcoming, and he was just different from a lot of the other guys that I had met in Joburg and elsewhere. However, we were both very lucky, I think, given the circumstances, because when the first year that we dated long distance. Only after that did it become serious, because we realized how much we still felt connected even though we were so far. And so it allowed us to both work on ourselves separately, but also have dedicated time to each other in a way that wasn't every single day. And so it was just enough to miss each other, and then we saw each other again. And so we kind of continued that cycle. I think right place, right time, context. There were so many factors that were in our favor that allowed that relationship to turn into what it did.
For me, it was actually at a weird phase of my life, because I just had been quite sick and hospitalized, and it was for a few months. So I was just coming out of it, and I just wanted to party and enjoy and go back into life. And I was not thinking at all about meeting someone. I was very happy being single. And I mean, suppose it happens in these moments where you're not looking for someone. And we went to the same concert, and we realized very quickly that we had very similar of music taste. Yeah, I think we really connected straight away in a very strange way and unexpected way. And I mean, very quickly we saw each other again, and it was weird. I mean, now I look back, it's like we were literally seeing every day. But I think none of us had overthought what was going on. And I think we didn't realize what was going on, that we were really connecting and falling in love. If you ask both of us, I suppose we like it just happened, and it feels like it was supposed to happen, but it happened so fast.
Yeah.
All of it.
Another interesting thing you both have in common is that you've gone for men in the limelight. What does it feel like to have a private and personal connection with somebody who is well known generally by the public?
Would you say your partner is introverted or extroverted?
Introverted.
Okay, so mine is as well. It's interesting given the career choice that they have and the public platforms that they have. However, in a personal way, he's very introverted. So when we're at home, he's actually very quiet. And it was one of the things I appreciated too, is being in a space where we could still do our own things, and there wasn't pressure to have a continuous conversation and to constantly find something to talk about, but we just enjoyed each other's presence, even if we weren't doing anything.
I resonate with exactly what you say. It doesn't feel any different. And I will say that thing about Johannesburg in general, and I've never had this in other countries. Artist community can be very closed and quite pretentious sometimes. And you're like, if you arrive as a teacher, it's like, you're just a teacher. Whereas here, straight away in South Africa, it's all mixed up. It doesn't matter. You can be a teacher, an artist, an actor, a singer, an accountant in the same room. Everyone is having interesting conversation. You're not defined like, I don't know how famous you are. And I feel like it's accessible. And maybe it's something about South African artists. I don't know. Even more since I'm with him, a lot of my friends are artists, and I don't feel less. Or I feel like we all have to contribute. We can all contribute to the conversation in different way. And grateful because I feel inspired and not threatened, which would be difficult.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk about you guys becoming mothers, and making that transition in a place like Joburg, or in a place away from your original comfort zone, and then parenting together with your partners.
Maybe let's start with the first point because it's about that transition of identity.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Becoming a mom, I think the most difficult thing was around that identity shift. I think some of the best advice I received, I can't remember if it was from my therapist or from a friend, but it's basically to forget about your old life. Don't think about this contradiction between your old life and your new life, but it's just your new life. Not forget who you were, but don't ever think that your current new life is just a phase and someday you'll be able to go back. It just kind of merges into one, and now it's just your new life, and you must define what that means for you.
I suppose for me, what has been quite challenging, and I want to go back to becoming a mother in Joburg,
Right.
is that there's been a lot of positive sides and some, for me, harder side. The positive sides are that I think there's a real community of women here. And I feel like we speak about motherhood. And I actually more than in France, because in France, we're still in this maternal figure of like, if you want to be a mom and a feminist, you need to work and you need to forget about breastfeeding after 3 months. And I got very angry at this while I was in France because I was reshaping my definition of feminism as a mother. And for me, I felt very powerful to breastfeed my child. So my first anger started in France, where I was like, I don't agree with what society in France is trying to tell me what I should be as a mother. Then I arrived in South Africa and I felt I was belonging and I felt supported. So for that, I'm very grateful of having done most of my motherhood in South Africa. But like suddenly you have to pay for everything. What my biggest difficulty, I will say, in Johannesburg is financial, is that, you're supposed to belong to this middle class, but you can't afford to be in that middle class. I can't cope financially. And I think it's so important to speak up about how difficult these first years are as a mother. And in a place like Joburg, how much I love Joburg, as a mother, I'm starting to see it differently because of the harsh reality of where you have to pay for everything. I come from a country where you have a lot of system into place.
I mean, it's interesting hearing you talk about France, because my alternative of raising a child in the US is not like that, where it's very expensive to, number one, give birth, number two, to raise children, number three, to send them to school. Many women are actually leaving their full-time job because the trade-off between working in a job that wasn't paying very much and staying home to provide free childcare, more women are choosing to stay home and take care of their kids. So in South Africa, I feel actually very fortunate. When I'm at home, there are also a lot of family obligations. It sounds terrible to say that there are obligations, but it's much easier to kind of create the lifestyle that you want without feeling bad about it, because you literally cannot be there.
Just on that last point, I will say, how much harsh I can find Joburg. I know that Joburg has also offered me things I would have never had in France. Being away from home, geographically away, has helped me to be more who I am. And I'm really enjoying the person I'm trying to become and the person I'm seeing myself becoming. Maybe I wouldn't have had in France. Being closer to family, maybe asking myself less questions, maybe being less exposed to my own weaknesses, because being in a system where things are easier. I'm like, oh yeah, actually, that's so positive. You're right. Yeah, maybe if I was not faced with all these challenges, I will not change in the way I'm changing now.
listen on as I chat with Tiffany and reflect on the conversation with Muriel and Shalane, because that's where we do the work of unpacking. It was really quite wonderful to hear two people speaking about their love for Joburg and South Africa. And having this love-hate relationship with Joburg and what that does for like offering perspective and a healthy kind of distance and a healthy relationship with a city that is quite tough. The challenge of Joburg, of South Africa, comes up, but it comes up in a very different way in this conversation. And it was so wonderful to be reminded through their eyes and their responses of what is so special about being here. I really loved that. I guess first thing to start with is the challenge of making home away from home. And it's a challenge that is financial, it's a challenge that's emotional. You're away from your family, you're away from your comfort, you're away from a life that you know, a kind of like framework of understanding that you are familiar with. I want to open.
Sure.
To you.
Sure. So it is meant to be an episode about Joburg. It's important to me that we open that up, that territory is open to everyone. And what both Muriel and Shalane share equally is that they don't live expat lives in Johannesburg. They are both people who were born outside of South Africa, who have deliberately built localized lives in Joburg. And so they speak about this place, in my opinion, from a very localized perspective. And I wanted to honor that about the way that they've been able to build a life here. It always fascinates me who Joburg makes an imprint on and what kind of person who was not born here can call this place home. What it means to build home through love, to feel easy, to feel comfortable, to feel like you belong. That's the backdrop. You never really know it going into it. They both came to Joburg with no hope or expectation of this ever becoming a home. And years later, they've now found love here and became mothers here.
I think it's one of the last points that Muriel makes towards the end of the episode, you know, having gone through this conversation around the challenges of living in another place, living in Joburg in particular, South Africa in particular. She also comes to a recognition that without the challenges on her, she would not access parts of herself, or the parts of herself that she has been able to access.
Absolutely. The community of women here is the thing that grounds her most, the community of mothers here. But what is grinding at her is the lack of welfare system. Shalane sort of draws that out of her, because Shalane then describes how, yes, welfare system doesn't exist in South Africa, but can I tell you how that is compounded in the US?
Yes.
I like this conversation about the US, France, and South Africa, because it is about having a more global conversation. I am interested in how women who become mothers are able to build their lives in different countries. And South Africa is this weird middle
ground. Yeah. From like the welfare state or the extreme capitalist state. When I think about becoming a mom, and what I find incredibly empowering about the way that they both speak about their journeys of motherhood, and especially motherhood in a different place, is I sometimes freak out about the idea of being away from home. What will it mean to go through this incredibly magical but life-changing journey, but away from your comfort zone, your kind of like first support system?
I think sometimes let me speak on behalf of myself. I doubt how much shedding is necessary to break into new roles in my life. They speak to how much you have to just let go of and keep moving. I have no doubt that they've probably moved through so many buckets of tears to get to this point. But what they do so beautifully is say, I'm able to build things in a different place on my terms, and that feels empowering.
And Shalane references this moment of becoming a mother where she received advice on forgetting about your previous life, forget about the old life and embrace the new life. And it's not about forgetting your old life, but coming to terms with the fact that this new life now, this is not a phase. It's a powerful way of thinking about who you are, what your identity is in that process of mothering, becoming a mother. But it also connects to this process of moving away from home and redefining yourself in a new place. This is your life now, and this is the version that you're going to write from this point. She brings it up in the context of mothering, but I actually find that it's a very powerful way to think about the journey of making home, making life, making love, making family in a new context.
And this is why I honor their bravery. It was only possible to get to this point by moving on, by moving through, by moving with their feelings, their ideas, their hopes, their aspirations. That if they had to stay stagnant, they would never have reached this point. I agree with you in the way that she describes accepting what she needs to forget and putting her blinders on to focus on where she wants to go. With mothering is, I think, very much how she's gotten to where she is now in other aspects of her life. And it's been really helpful for me to see how there are people who are flying while building the plane at the same time. The biggest takeaway I have from this conversation with them is let go. Let go. And then be surprised by what a new place can offer you.
Are We Our Work is an independent research project and podcast anthology series centered around questions of love, fulfillment, relationships, identities, and work in South Africa. Co-hosted by myself, Kemu Busielo, and my dear co-host,
Nadia Patel.
This episode was produced and edited by Tiffany Ibrahim, sound design by Joao Orekia, music by Vuma Levine, illustration by Softwork Studio, and web design by Sky Quadlin. To stay up to date with the project, please check out Are We Our Work on Instagram. Thank you so much for listening, and see y'all next week.